So both of these sounds are the exact same bass running through the exact same rig. How's that possible? Stick around and find out. Hi, my name's Dan, talking to you guys about all things music and bass. I've done a lot of videos talking about different pieces of gear, different ways that, you can build pedal boards, set up basses, and kind of get all these different sounds out of certain pieces of gear. One thing I find, especially on YouTube, is that a lot of bass playing on YouTube is very gear focused. I don't understand why, gear companies are the ones paying YouTubers to make content about their gear. One thing I think that gets lost is just talking about how much power there is in your own hands to shape your tone. And oftentimes, that's the best place to start when you're running into tone issues, rather than chasing gear and buying a bunch of things. So here's my 5 tips for ways you can shape your bass sound using nothing but your hands. So today we're running my Warwick Corvette Behringer 5-string. It's got 2 J pickups. Now I got this bass in passive mode, both pickups even, and all I'm running into is my Empress compressor and my Dark Glass X Ultra, but I'm just using it for the EQ and the cab sim, no distortion, preamp or anything. So the first and biggest way to shape your tone is going to be fingers. Slap. Wait, what did I just say? Fingers. Slap. Wait, I said this is 5 tips. That's 3 things. Fingers. Slap. Pick. Really, this first tip is just one tip in general. The 3 most common ways of playing bass are either slap bass, pick bass, or fingerstyle bass. And oftentimes when we're playing a line, we never really think about the other options we have in terms of switching to pick, fingers, or slap. Especially a lot of bass players kind of end up in one camp. Not so much, I don't think there's too many bass players that end up just in the slap camp. Maybe Dave 504 is one. But yeah, a lot of people get branded as a pick player or a fingers player, but knowing both and knowing how to slap can be a really great way to completely flip your bass sound. And all you gotta do is you pick up a pick or just switch the way you're playing. So here, I'm going to try out all 3 techniques on Flowers by Miley Cyrus and kind of see what each one sounds like. So first we got fingerstyle, the way it was played on the record. And then next we got pick playing. Now, the song isn't originally picked, but you might find yourself in a situation where pick works. Maybe you're playing more of a rock gig and all the other songs are picked, and to switch to fingers for like a cover of one song, the sound might not fit in with the rest of the set, especially if your band is, let's say, doing a more rock cover of this song. Even if you're not going for a rock vibe, sometimes the sound of a pick is just what works in that moment for that bass, that player, in that situation. The last option is slap. Now, this is a bit of a controversial one. When we think of slapping, oftentimes we think of just completely rewriting the line, doing stuff like, that kind of really flashy slap thing, the kind of thing that gives slap a bad name for bass players. Oftentimes, there's a famous story of Steely Dan telling their bass player, don't do slap, and he actually had to put up a small partition to hide the fact he was slapping because he knew it was the best sound for that song. And this approach kind of goes after what Marcus Miller talked about, being a session player in the 80s. A lot of these mixes were getting so dense that the bass was getting lost, and sometimes just taking the regular line you're playing, you don't have to even change it at all, and just slap it, just makes it pop through a bit more. And this is what that sounds like over Flowers. Now, the second tip I have for how to change a bass sound is palm muting. Now, when I was growing up, there's kind of this myth that, you don't palm mute on bass. I think a lot of that is kind of half true. It comes from this idea that, when you're playing guitar, oftentimes you're palm muting to kind of tame the open string, especially in, a rock or metal context. We got songs like, Unholy Confessions by Avenged Sevenfold, where it's kind of got the guitar part at least, has that return to the open string a bunch of times. And on guitar, putting your palm there actually kind of helps clean that string up. But on bass, it just kind of ends up sounding muddy. And back in the day, before we had access to isolated tracks or good systems to hear bass on other than old computer speakers, we didn't realize that the bass is actually going, which is a lot cleaner. Same thing with like a song like Basket Case by Green Day. A lot of people assume that because the guitar part does this jumping in and out of palm muting, that the bass would do the same thing. But really, the bass is actually doing something a lot more interesting. So there's a bit of truth in bass players don't palm mute. So the way palm muting is often used on bass is to kind of get the sound of a foam or sponge mute. A lot of early basses actually came with a mute installed on the bridge, and that's what was often under these ashtray covers. Or if they didn't, a lot of players stuffed foam or sponges or whatever under there to get this muted sound. So a song like Good Vibrations, without palm muting, sounds a little too aggressive, but with palm muting, it has that sound. So oftentimes when I find myself palm muting, it's to get that kind of vintage sound, not to kind of like copy what the guitar is doing. Another example is like, you know, when my band's playing Missy by the Rolling Stones, and especially when you do fingerstyle with a palm mute, with the thumb and the finger, man, that's just got such a smooth sound. Once again, like I don't even have a tone knob on this bass. Like, this is all coming from just my hand. The next tip for how to shape your tone is right hand placement. So depending on where you put your hand to pluck on the bass, you get lots of different sounds. And actually, a big eye-opening moment for me was I was at a rehearsal for a Bruce Springsteen tribute. And I was there because the regular bass player couldn't do the upcoming gigs, so they called me in to be a substitute. So at the rehearsal, the regular bass player was there. You know, we'd trade back and forth. Like, he'd play once in the band, I'd play once in the band, just so we could both kind of see what the other was doing. And just to save time, I'm like, here, just use my bass. I just handed him this war work. I was like, you know, don't bother setting up a separate rig. We'll just share a bass. I could not believe how different he sounded. He didn't move a single knob. He didn't change anything on the amp. But just a different guy picks up the same bass, and like, it's miles different. And it blew me away. And a big thing I noticed is he plays a lot more over the bridge and I play a lot more over the neck. And ever since then, I've started using that a little bit more, being like, oh yeah, I remember how good Devin sounded. He was playing back here a little lighter as opposed to my tendency to play a little heavier over the neck. So here's a song where I can show what this sounds like. So here's my fingers playing over the neck. And here's my fingers playing over the bridge. Once again, worlds different, and all I did was just move my hand from this pickup to this pickup. The fourth tip I have is how you attack the strings. So a big thing in rock and metal that I talk about with a lot of my students is, instead of starting with your finger on the string and pulling through, it's almost like how a hockey player does a slap shot. I kind of use the analogy of slap shots and wrist shots in hockey. So a wrist shot, your hand starts on the puck and you flick. A slap shot is where you wind up and you get this huge momentum flowing through the puck. And same thing on bass, our rest strokes, kind of like our wrist shots, our finger on the string, pull through. But the slap shot kind of thing is where your fingers start off the bass, swing through like you're doing a slap shot, often landing on the pickup or the end of the neck. So here's the same clip I just played, but I'm going to do a bit of these, I don't know if there's a technical term for it, I'm just going to call them slap shots. I'm going to do a whole take of slap shots. Here we go. And same with the pick. Just like how we have rest strokes when we're playing fingerstyle, we have rest strokes with a pick too, where the pick picks through the string and then lands the next string like that, as opposed to free strokes where you just kind of pick and not land anywhere. So here's a take of rest strokes versus free strokes with a pick. Once again, wildly different. And all these samples, by the way, I've corrected them to be the same gain, so you're not hearing any volume jump. That's just strictly tone. Then the last tip I have is actually left-hand placement. I know you're probably thinking left-hand placement, but like a note's a note. You can't play it anywhere. Oh, you can play it more than one spot. So depending on where you play on the neck, you can get a variety of sounds too. So for example, people who are going for that more like growly kind of sound might, play close to the neck and also down here. I find a lot of rock players kind of play in this sweet spot in the middle of the neck where you can dig in a little more, it sounds a little fuller. And I find hip-hop R&B stuff, a big vibe these days is, P bass with flats playing up the neck. Or even I'm playing up an octave from here, it still sounds full because it kind of the further you move up the neck, bassier and deeper things sound. If you ever was to. It just sounds so thick compared to... Here this is in the song. I'm going to play the same line down here at the first fret. My right hand is not going to change. I'm going to be right here with my thumb next to this pickup so I know exactly where I am. And I'm going to play first fret and 6th fret B flat and do a little line. Once again, and this might be the biggest one, completely different vibes in both areas of the neck. So that's my 5 tips for how to shape your tone on bass with no pedals, no effects. Like I said, I still haven't touched my volume or bass, treble, no EQs, no pedals. This is all just coming from my hands. And the cool thing with that is once you can do all these and then mix them too, like I said, you might want to combine playing here with playing at the end of the neck with playing at the bridge. Or you might want to combine playing up the neck and playing over here. There's so many sounds you can get and so many ways you can play. You have such a world of tone options available, and it doesn't require any gear, any pedals. And the best part is when you're on a gig, you don't have to worry about what you clicked on or off on your pedal board. You can just move your hands around, change how you're playing, grab a pick, and just do it on the fly. And as you're listening to the band, be like, okay, my bass is getting a little lost right now. Let's slap a little bit. Oh, I'm sounding a little harsh. Let's palm mute. These are really great tools to have in your toolbox as a bass player. So let me know, what do you guys think? What sort of tricks do you do to shape your tone on the bass? Is there anything I missed? And is there anything you'd like me to cover in future videos, like exploring the tone controls on a bass, exploring other ways to shape your sound? I'd love to hear from you. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a good day.